The Allied attacks on Libya are making some American oil companies jittery. As one analyst put it, quote, the biggest risk for oil companies involves possible damage to their facilities, which would make it harder to bring production back up once the conflict ends. Some facilities could be part of collateral damage from raids. Others could be sabotaged as retaliation. Let's see how Libya could play out for investors. Joining me now from Austin, Texas, Peter Zeihan of Stratfor, a global intelligence provider. Mr. Zeihan, welcome to Bloomberg's Bottom Line. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Talk to us about the implications here. Libyan oil could be offline for at least some time until this situation is resolved. What is that going to mean for oil exports?
Oil exports, for all practical purposes, are offline indefinitely until such time as the military situation stabilizes and leads to a new political arrangement in Libya. There's no reason to expect the oil to come back online anytime soon. You're talking about 1.6 million barrels per day of light sweet crude. Really can't be replaced anywhere else in the world. And with the problems in Japan, global demand is actually going up because the Japanese are having to replace their nuclear-fired generators with oil-fired. That's going to make the demand situation much stronger for the foreseeable future.
Is one of the concerns now any possible attacks on Libya's oil infrastructure?
Not at present. Both sides have a vested interest in preserving the integrity of the system. We have yet to see any meaningful attacks against any of the export infrastructure. There have been some reports of attacks on refineries in order to prevent one side or the other from being able to fuel their military advances, but those even have been limited at this point. The Qadhafi government wants to consolidate power again. That's going to require bribing a lot of people.
Right.
The opposition, should they take control, wants to be able to bribe people in exactly the same way. You got to remember, this is a country of 6 million people in a stretch of land that's about as far apart as West Palm Beach and Hartford, Connecticut, but only about 10 kilometers thick. They don't have a lot in common. This has not been a normal country. It never even existed until the Italian colonial period. So holding it together with cash is about the only option they have.
Well, would Qadhafi sabotage oil assets? As I recall, we saw a lot of that going on during the first Gulf War when Saddam Hussein set some of those oil fields in Iraq on fire.
Well, Qadhafi is unpredictable, I'll give him that. But bear in mind that during the first Gulf War, Saddam's forces were sabotaging someone else's oil production. Qadhafi realizes that if he doesn't have sufficient cash, really his power base dwindles down to his home tribe. And that is simply not enough to control all of Libya.
Well, we should point out that we have some of the loyalists to Qadhafi. They are entrenched in a lot of these oil cities, correct?
Absolutely. The no-fly zone, or the aggressive interpretation and execution of the no-fly zone, has prevented Qadhafi's forces from linking up city to city, and there are broad swaths of desert in between. But they do command 3/4 of the cities, almost all of them in the west, and even a handful in the east, which means that the only way you can really root them out is for a significant ground force to go city to city one at a time and exercise their influence. That requires more troops than the West at present is willing to commit.
Right. What's the likelihood that Qadhafi would turn to terrorism to try to push back against the Allied effort?
The problem is he doesn't have a very good way to exercise that option. His forces are limited to the cities. He doesn't have air power. He doesn't have naval power that allows him to get out. And bear in mind that the terrorist strategy that he followed back in the 70s and 80s was opening the country of Libya to allow militants of every flavor to come and train in Libya. That could bear fruit, but only in the long term. He's been out of that business for several years.
Mr. Zeihan, in our last 30 seconds, what's the impact going to be long term on global oil?
Well, that depends upon how messy this gets. If we wake up tomorrow and Qadhafi has slipped down some stairs and fallen on some bullets, we could have a very rapid political evolution here. We could even have independence of the East and have two separate oil emirates glowering each other over a 500-kilometer spit of desert. So long as the infrastructure is not physically damaged, this doesn't have to turn into a nightmare. It's obvious that everybody wants the oil to flow on both sides, just under their control as opposed to the others.
All right. Peter Zeihan of Stratfor joining us from Austin. Thanks so much.